State-owned enterprises have come under sharp scrutiny in recent times. Take the nation's power retailer, ECG, for example. This week, it has been berated for its procurement inefficiencies. But the problems of SOEs and state interests in general run deeper than you may know. That's why in this edition of Hot Issues, we put the spotlight on these institutions and whether or not it is time to reinvest in them or cut our losses. In the 2023 State Ownership Report, while some sectors are showing signs of improvement, others remain in financial distress. But beyond the numbers, the report exposes deep governance failures, with nearly half of SOEs failing to submit audited accounts, weak board oversight, and poor enforcement of performance contracts. In this edition, I sit with the head of the institution tasked to oversee Ghana's struggling state enterprises, and we'll find out from him how he plans to tackle these urgent challenges. I am Kemeni Amano, and my next guest is the Director General of State Interest and Governance Authority, Professor Michael Kpessa-Whyte. Prof, you're welcome to Hot Issues.
Thank you very much.
And congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you. Thank you.
When you look at what the Auditor General's Office does, combining that with the various sectors where these organizations or institutions find themselves, it's easy to say that what SIGA is mandated to do becomes a duplicitous role of these ministries and the Auditor General's Office combined. What's your response to that?
So I think that SIGA's mandate is broader than that.
It's broader.
The Auditor General, for instance, appoints auditors who looks into the books of these institutions, and then the auditors, make their observations and present them to either Minister of Finance or the government, as it were, in their annual reports. The ministries still have policy oversight for these institutions. What SIGA does now is to have operational oversight. That is one. And beyond that, SIGA is also supposed to look into their governance practices and also supply them with the best practice as far as corporate governance is concerned. So SIGA works with these SOEs or these entities along the value chain across 3 years at any given time. SIGA helps them to look into the future. That is, for instance, we are in 2025 now. SIGA is working with them as far as their 2026 performance contracts is concerned. SIGA is also working with them now by monitoring that which they are currently doing. And SIGA is also working by analyzing and producing what we call the AGIPA report and then the SOR report as far as what they had done previously is concerned. And all these are supposed to provide for policymakers a nuanced view of where we are as far as each of the entities are concerned, and what new ideas or what creativity and innovative strategies could be deployed to enhance their efficiency, profitability, and growth in general.
So, again, standing on that, the question then will be, since you took office, do you think that that vision and the mission for SIGA has been achieved since the last 4 years?
I think you should think of it this way. SIGA is 5 years old, right? If it's a human being, it's a toddler, right? Not anything to really be expecting too much from at the moment. But I think that SIGA is also a toddler with adult's vision to ensure that things are done properly. And the reason I say so is that the trends I have seen since SIGA began to push the entities towards compliance as far as the submission of the various reports. So, for instance, every entity is expected every quarter to submit some specific reports to SIGA. SIGA then analyzes these reports and either flags where we think there are concerns or provides some insights to the ministries or the governments in general as to what could be done differently or what you watch out for. And we have seen that since 2019, you notice that the loss-making entities are gradually reducing, even though it is expected that it should reduce faster than we are seeing. That is one. Secondly, too, we have seen that the margin of losses are also gradually reducing, which also means that many of these entities are preparing to break even, make profits, and then maybe become dividend-paying entities. And this is just within the 5 years lifetime of SIGA. Mind you, a lot of these entities have been operating for more than 50 years, right? And they have already acquired certain institutional cultures, certain orientations, certain routine habits that they may not necessarily even see as drawing them down. SIGA is now expected to observe them closely in a microscopic, perspective, and points to them some practices, habits, routine behaviors that actually may have been contributing to their cost line, or that may have been contributing to inefficiency, and help them to eliminate those particular habits and conducts. And within 5 years, I think that the trend is showing that given the supports, given the resources, and given the boost, SIGA will be able to work with them to actually make a major transition, because many of these, our SOEs, holds a chunk of a state's assets. And if you manage them well, your dependency on foreign donors or your dependency on so-called development partners will probably reduce, and you'll be able to generate a lot more income from within to promote economic growth and expand the frontiers of the economy and provide job opportunities for many Ghanaians.
SIGA hasn't published its 2024 report. Do you know why?
So this is how it works. Okay. The Public Financial Management Act requires all the entities, in fact, all state entities, to make sure that they submit their audited financial statements to SIGA by the end of April, right, of the ensuing year. So 2024 has just ended. Yeah. We are now in April. By the end of this April,
that's when they should submit
their reports. Now, when they submit their report for 2024, mind you, we are in 2025, SIGA now spends time to do the critical analysis, and then out of that analysis, it produces the SOR 2024, right, which you are almost already to read, right? And so we at SIGA have...
It sounds like you have a lot of work ahead of you.
There is a lot of work ahead. Last week, we spent 2 days to meet all the entities, all the 175 entities. I think last week's meeting was with about 140-something, 43 or so of them. And the idea was to basically take them through why it is important to comply to the deadline given by the Public Financial Management Act, and why it is also important to submit that on time, and what sanctions are available to be applied if you don't comply. Once they submit, we now, by the directives given by the President during our last engagement with him and the SOEs at Kpessa-Whyte, we now have been asked by the President to submit a report by the 15th of May of all the entities that have complied and all those that have not complied.
The annual reports.
Yes, the annual audited financial statements. Some are complaining that, they don't have boards in place. Well, we basically say you don't have boards in place, that's fine, but you are spending, right? So what it is that when your audited financial statement is ready, make sure that the individuals who are currently running the institution send it alongside with a memo that specifies that your board is yet to be in place, but these are the signings currently. Then when your board is in place, ultimately, and you sign off, you send us a copy of that as well. So we expect, by the end of April, 2 categories of reports: the management accounts and the audited accounts at SIGA. And once we get that, we begin the process of doing the SOR. The SOR is not done only on the basis of the audited accounts. There are, other non-financial elements that SIGA also uses to produce another report, which is the AGIPA, the Governance and Institutional Assessment Report as well. So we are collecting all that information now and are actively working on the 2 reports simultaneously.
I see, but we've seen in the past how, and like I said at the beginning of the program, about half of our interests, state-owned, JVCs, majority, shareholding. The minority, we seem to do well there because we are not in charge. But on the other hand, we see that a lot of them do not produce their audited reports at the end of the day. What happens under your tenure if they don't, submit their reports as stipulated by you?
So
now?
the SIGA Act, so first of all, let me say that all the colleagues who have been appointed to the different SOEs and others, state entities, there are 175 state entities in all, right? All the CEOs that have been appointed, I have absolute confidence in the fact that they will work to adhere to the deadlines. I mean, these deadlines, frankly speaking, were not set by SIGA. I mean, they were set by the Public Financial Management Act. Plus the fact that the president, out of his busy schedule, took time to meet with the SOEs, especially the heads of the SOEs and the other entities, and instructed or re-emphasized what the law says. I want to believe that many of them will submit these reports on time. But be that as it may, I don't think that it is difficult to, produce a report that specifies those who have honored the legal requirements of submission and those who have not.
But SIGA has the ability to sanction.
Absolutely. I would be only following the law if I submit a list of those who have, submitted their public financial, those who have submitted their audited accounts and those who have not submitted their audited accounts, right? I would not have been doing anything extraordinary, and I intend to follow the law. What I will plead is that colleagues should not give the opportunity to be presented as though they are the ones flouting the law. And the president was quite clear that, look, if you are part of those highlighted or flagged as not adhering to the submission of management accounts and audited accounts by the end of this month, you should know that sanctions will apply. And he was quite clear in saying that some of those sanctions will include removal from office. And so I will encourage my colleagues that as much as possible, let's continue to work together in a collaborative manner and ensure that we adhere to these things so as to make the work of SIGA easy, and also to ensure that we get timely information, analyze quickly, and provide them with feedback that will help them, innovate and improve their operations.
Have you received your quarterly report yet?
So the quarterly reports have been trickling in. We are currently in the first quarter of this year, right? Some of them are still submitting the last quarter report of last year, right? This quarter hasn't really ended. Yes, well, it ended, in technically just a few days ago, so we can grant them. Plus, you have to think of the fact that we have also just taken a transition. So, for instance, I'll give you an example. I had just taken office, right? And then I was brought a number of reports because we too have to submit, our own reports to, let's say, the Controller and Accountant General, and then the Auditor General, for instance. And then I was brought a report to sign. Because I'm the head of the institution, so I have to sign. I think it behoves on me to take my time and read through it, carefully ask for clarity or clarification on a number of issues, call divisional heads and make sure that we are all on the same page and I get a better background to some of those things. And so some of these can, frankly, make it look as though you are delaying. But what we did was that when I said I wanted clarity, I want to get understanding, quickly wrote to the receiving agency, I think it is the Auditor General or I think so, and say, can you give me a few more days because of ABC? So the transition years are a bit turbulent. But this year in particular, we don't want to use transition as an excuse. That's why we have been quick in organizing all the CEOs together in one space. And the president has been very gracious to have come on board and basically say, look, guys, we need to do this together. The reset is not just, it's not going to just be a talk, and that we must walk the talk. And one of the key components of the reset is compliance. Let's comply. Now, you see, the beauty about compliance and how it has a backward positive linkage to efficiency is that when you are complying in receiving, in submitting your reports on a regular basis, there comes a time when you become conscious of the content of what you are submitting, because the content of what you are submitting will be the basis for evaluating whether you are doing well or not doing well. And so, first of all, you must comply. But beyond compliance, that which you are complying with or that which is contained in what you are submitting must reflect positively on your institution in terms of performance. So you'll be compelled to do something good so as to make sure that it reflects in the report that you will take and submit to SIGA. And by that doing, we will be enhancing efficiency and also enhancing productivity and overall operations of our entities.
Indeed. Let's look at their financial performance when we come back from this break. Don't go away. Welcome back. It's still hot issues here on TV3, and I'm seated with the Director General of SIGA, Professor Michael Kpessa-Whyte. Prof, again, I appreciate you talking to us so much. But let's look at the financial performance as captured in the 2023 report. And as you rightly, indicated earlier, there are losses, although there seemed to be an improvement on the losses compared to 2021 and 2022. My question to you is, what could be contributing to these losses, very huge losses at that?
Okay, so thank you very much. If you look at the categories of entities that the SIGA is expected to provide oversight for, there are three categories. So before I come to the financials, I think that will help ground the financials properly. There are three categories of entities. There are the ones we call the SOEs, which are the state enterprises. They are expected to run mostly on business or commercial lines, even though some of them have some social objectives as well, and make money, make profits, and also provide quality services. Then there are also the other category, which are also businesses, but they are JVCs, they are joint ventures. And these joint ventures, some of them are government owing majority or private sector owing majority, or government having controlling share, or whatever the case may be. They are also another category. Then there is a third category that we call the other state entities. They really are more like entities that are in the regulatory space, or they are into some specific service space. So Food and Drugs Board, maybe National Health Insurance, National Service, Ghana Tertiary Education Commission. Those institutions, we call them the other state entities, right? Or other state entities, OSE. Now, when we talk about the financials, we expect the SOEs, in addition to providing quality services to Ghanaians and enhancing their operational efficiency, to also make profits. But beyond profit, we also expect them to pay dividends to the state. For us, for me, ultimately, if you are not paying dividend, profitability is not enough.
Does not mean anything.
It doesn't really mean anything. And the reason this is key is because you will notice from their financials that quite a significant number of the 53 SOEs are making profits. About 33, 34 are making profits, right, out of the 53. Now, that sounds like a great number of them are making profit. But the question is, how many of them are paying dividend? A small fraction, less than 10, are probably paying dividend to the state. And so if you are established and you are making profit, but you are not paying dividend to the state, then that which the state needs to get from you, beyond the provision of services that you do to the population, is also not coming. So that is one. The other thing is that the conversation in town, and as you alluded to in your question, is that we are not seeing profitability as much as we should see as far as the SOE space is concerned. What it is that those making the losses are actually overshadowing those making profits. More are making profits, but they are overshadowed by those making the losses. In other words, the few, or the relatively few that are making losses, the quantum of their loss is so huge that it swallows and wipes out the profit made by the majority. And most of those making these big losses are in the energy sector. Indeed. So that if we get the financials in the energy sector right, we definitely will begin to tell a completely different story as far as the financials of these SOEs are concerned. And quite a number of them, frankly, when you look into their financials carefully, or you analyze their financial statements carefully, I think the thing would be to advise their boards and their CEOs to take a closer look at some of their expenditure lines and see how best they can, rein in expenditure or cut down on costs.
You think expenditure is the problem?
Well, yes, because, interestingly, when we had an engagement with them last week, we had a nice and interesting presentation from the head of national accounts at the Controller and Accountant General's Department, Dr. Mark Effort, who they also do similar analysis to what we've been doing. And their analysis literally was just a validation of what we were also seeing. You will be surprised that SOEs actually, because they hold a chunk of the state's assets, in terms of revenue, they contribute more to our revenue overall than, let's say, the central government and the MMDAs. But in terms of expenditure, they actually also spend more than they bring in as well. So there must be something in the expenditure section of our SOEs that needs to be looked at carefully. But expenditure is not the only thing.
Is that something you plan to
Absolutely.
Once we go over their books with them?
Once we identify the problem, we intend in the next performance contract negotiations or the mid-year review of the performance contract, of the entities, we'll flag these things and see how best we can rein them, in. But it is not just the expenditure side that is also a problem. Look, profit or loss is the product of human decision, right? Some of the decisions made at the level of boards and at the level of, let's say, management needs to be thought through a bit more carefully, needs to be given more critical, assessment to see whether they are bringing any value for money or bringing value to the overall objectives of these entities. And we are expecting that the boards that are being constituted now will demonstrate, high sense of independence as far as their decision-making processes are concerned, and ensure that their decisions are firmly aligned with, one, the performance contracts that are in place currently, and two, the overall objectives of the government as far as implementing the 24-hour economy.
So essentially, to put it in a sentence of what you have just said, some of the choices we are making for CEOs, board members of some of these institutions, these people are not taking the best decisions for the companies. Is it as a result of them being inefficient for the positions they occupy, or it is just a matter of they made a mistake?
I think we should look at it from a different perspective, and it's really not a question of the individuals not being competent or anything of the sort. The structure of corporate governance, as practiced everywhere in the world, is such that if we adhere to it effectively, naturally, the results that will come out of that will be something that will be very pleasing to all of us. You need to have a board, and the board members need to demonstrate a sense of collective ownership of that particular space, ownership in the larger interest of the Ghanaian public. If you are a member of a board, you are there because the Ghanaian state trusts that when they put you there, you make the best decision and deliver on the mandate of that institution. And long after you are gone, you'll be remembered as the individual who, when you were there, or a collection of individuals who, when you were there, you did everything you can to protect the interests of the state, right? So that you don't spend recklessly on all that. Now, the board also needs to be mindful of the fact that their decision is what is implemented by the CEO. And the CEO also needs to know that the board actually is the oversighting body and not necessarily the other way around, where the CEO will just, tell the board, let's do this, let's do that. So the boards, I expect to know exactly what what is expected of them. And so one of the things SIGA is planning to do, which I think has been doing, but we'll highlight it a bit more, is that now that the boards are being constituted, we'll quickly move in and provide some induction for many of these boards to let them understand the larger orientation of the government, particularly President Mahama's intention to ensure that we completely align and make these SOEs make a transition to breaking even, making profit, and paying dividends to the state. In the era of fiscal consolidation, we want everybody to bring some money in. Some money is put into you, something must come back out of that. Otherwise, your existence will be questioned, right? So the boards must get this particular understanding, and the CEOs must as well align with this particular thinking. And when they do, anytime you sit around the board, the possibility is that you think about how and what will be the outcome of this decision that we are making as far as the larger developmental goal of the country is
concerned. This good
concerned.
corporate governance that you spoke about, we have a cabinet-approved good corporate governance for SIGA to apply to these SOEs. Yeah. To what extent is it being applied? Is it being used by the CEOs and the boards?
So SIGA annually engages the entities in performance contract negotiations, right? I think before the 2024 elections, the performance contract negotiations for 2025 were completed. So currently, as we speak, one is tempted to think that whatever is being done by all the entities is within the framework of what was agreed. In other words, many of these CEOs that have just been appointed are actually inheriting performance contracts that have already been negotiated and concluded with. Like it happens everywhere, governments, when transition occurs, appointees inherit assets and liabilities, right? So a CEO cannot go there and say, I don't like this performance contract, so I want to do my own thing. No, you have to actually work within that performance contract. For now, luckily, there is what we call mid-year reviews. If you have serious concerns, when the media reviews opportunity surfaces, as a new CEO, you can flag those things and they can be discussed and then
What exactly are
reintegrated.
in these performance contracts?
Well, they set clear targets. So, you see that it's not a one size fits all, right? You can apply the same indicators that you have for ECG, for instance, to, let's say, Ghana Water, or to, let's say, Gridco, or to, let's say, any of the banks, right? So each performance contract has to be taken on its own merit for each institution. So unless you take an institution,
each of the CEOs are given this performance contract.
yes, this performance contract. In fact, it is signed with the boards, right? The boards sign, having gone through the negotiations between the management and SIGA. For all of them, eventually, the board, being the overall governing entity of that institution, signs. And most of the time, it's signed by the board chair, witnessed by either the CEO or any other party that plays a key role within that institution. And when that is done, that becomes the framework within which. So you have targets, right? There are specific targets that are set in this. Targets in terms of service quality, targets in terms of your overall output, targets in terms of your financials. And there are also, in those performance contracts, benchmarks you are expected to meet, so that when you meet those benchmarks, you can also be allowed to have some incentives for, let's say, your staff or your management as well.
I see. I mean, so as this 2023 report tells us, there is weak corporate governance in some of these institutions, which we could easily translate to some of them are not adhering to the good corporate governance that, as a country, we have chosen to go by. What would you do? Because I was reading through, and I don't think that any company was fined at all within the year under review, noting that SIGA is empowered to be able to find some of these institutions.
So what it is that many people are in a hurry to see SIGA cracking the whip
all
over the place.
Why not?
Look, I mean, we will get there, but we are not there yet. The reason being that, one, SIGA is a baby that is even walking before crawling, right? Many of the institutions we are expected to provide oversight for are even more than our grandparents, right? They are older than us. Now, the reason I say so is that over the years, many of them have developed certain cultures that go to fuel the poor corporate governance that we are talking about. So it would be unfair to basically get in there and start dismantling and cracking things all over the place. We need to work with them collaboratively to understand how their own internal practices and taking for granted habits have a way of drawing them down and not allowing them to achieve what is stated in their performance contracts. With time, we will open a completely new culture. And when that happens, things will happen as a matter of course. So the cracking of the whip will come. But there are low-hanging fruits, for instance. If you are not submitting your quarterly reports, right? If we seek for information you are not giving us, or if you are battling SIGA as to whether you belong to the entities that should be there or not, we will rally the public behind SIGA. I mean, because SIGA is there as the ring fencer of the public interest, right? And we have had a few institutions that say, we don't want to be under SIGA. Then the question we ask is, if SIGA is there to enforce prudent financial management, good corporate governance, efficient management, and so on and so forth, and you as a CEO or as board, you are there and your intention is to also do the best for Ghanaians, why will you be saying that you don't want to be part of an institution that is expected to help you enforce these particular, values as well? Frankly speaking, it's just a handful that have raised those issues, but many of them have also crawled back to say, we see the point. This I consider to be transitional issues, not transition as in transition in terms of the last election, but transition from many of them doing things the way they please. And all of a sudden, there is now an entity or an institution that basically is supposed to define the borderlines, rein them in, and make sure that things are done properly. And so they are not used to that culture yet. And so over time, they will be used to that culture, and I believe that they will come to realize that we have a shared interest. I always say that when the entities do well, SIGA is happy, right? And so whatever we will do to make sure that they do well, we will do. So that when they do well and they are being praised, we will just sit at the background and clap for the fact that they have done well. When they don't do well, SIGA will be asked, why didn't you crack the whip? Why didn't you, why have you been watching them and then they slip over? Now, we also need to face it. The context in which we work, and when I say the context, the political context in which we work also has a huge implication for SOEs and our entities. What it means is that many of them, even though have their performance contract, their objectives and everything, they are also instruments of public policy. So you have a situation where something happens and government decides that we need ECG to supply power or to extend electricity to this place. It may not have been in their performance contracts, right? But government is also elected to achieve certain objectives so that the people will assess them on the basis of what they have achieved. So sometimes you have a situation where central government could jump in and say, we need you to probably provide free water, right? Or we need you to probably expand, your operations and give power to. If these things are not in your budget and they are not in your performance contracts, but you can also disobey government, you have to bring them in.
So there's a clash between political desires and then the good corporate governance.
Absolutely. And these are political desires that may not necessarily be bad. They also intend to serve the public interest.
Considering that SIGA is a government organization and at this point very close to the heart of the president of the day, I don't see how there will be a problem between streamlining the political desires with the needs of the corporate institutions. Would that be so bad?
No, I don't think it will be bad at all. I think that there is always an opportunity. In fact, there is a lot of flexibility, right? There is always an opportunity to sit with some of these entities. And I think what we at SIGA will encourage is that as and when there is the fierce urgency for something to be done by any of these entities, particularly when government thinks very dear, something that government thinks very dear to its heart, it is important for SIGA to equally be brought into perhaps even to be brought in first to try and do the analysis and the simulations.
Isn't that what is supposed to happen? The law that establishes SIGA says that you should have a say even in the appointment of CEOs.
Yes. I think that the current,
it's not being done.
The current administration is clearly doing that, is clearly following that. We have had engagements with, senior officials at the presidency on the need for SIGA to be, as it were, brought into the known as far as the board compositions and things are concerned because of some of the decisions that are already leading into the losses that we are quite concerned about. And the response has been very favorable from the presidency. There is a bit of tension as to what exactly SIGA wants. Do we want to have our people represented on the boards of these entities, which will serve as a proactive measure, or do we want another framework that allows SIGA to provide a benchmark for which people should be considered for the boards? So all these things
which one will work best?
Well, each of them have their merits and demerits. For instance, if SIGA is already represented on the board of an entity that you are expected to be oversighting, and your board members are there, and the entity clearly, goes, haywire or goes bonkers as far as its operations are concerned, what moral, authority will you, SIGA, have again and be holding them accountable when you actually are sitting on that particular board? So there is one. But those who hold the proactive view says being there means you flag it and make noise about it and prevent them from going, the path that will derail, the set targets and the performance indicators and so on and so forth. Then there are those who say, look, SIGA must operate from a certain position of, an arm's length where you are not embedded in them, but you are out there, with multiple eyes checking on them, monitoring them, evaluating their performances every now and then. I think we probably need a mix of both. We can't apply that to all institutions. There are some institutions where the conditions in which they are now, you may have to say that you need people with, people with the skills, the experience, and the tenacity to sit at the board and say, these are the borderlines, we can't go beyond these borderlines, and that might help them. There are others that you could say, you know what, we shouldn't really get to interfere. Let's just continue to provide. A little bit of both will help us a great deal.
I see. I do want us to touch on a few things before we take our next break. And one of those things will be, again, to go back to the books. We see that when we look at the companies in which we have minority shareholders, we as a country are minority shareholders. We're doing great. JVCs are not doing bad. In fact, 55% of total assets for 2023 fiscal year came from these joint ventures that government is a part of. When you look at this completely state-owned enterprises, that is where the problem is. Now, for me, that tells me that when government is in charge, it's a problem. Why do you think that is the case?
Well, I think on the surface of it, that is the kind of impression it gives. But when you consider it deeply, you realize that view is misplaced in the sense that, frankly speaking, there are more private entities or private companies collapsing in this country and any other country in the world than public enterprises.
Is it not because government is always bailing them out?
No. So listen carefully. There are more private companies facing serious challenges and collapsing on a regular basis, perhaps, than public entities. Why is that not a problem? Because we don't report it. It's a private man's business. It's some group of people in their business that has collapsed, and so nobody is making noise about it. And that is fair. You can grant them. One public entity doesn't do well, and everybody is up in arms. Is that legitimate? Yes, it's legitimate because that is where all of us put our money. So we have a right to make noise about it. So this argument about the private side does better than the public side needs to be examined more carefully and more critically, because the public sector is usually subjected to a number of principles that the private sector doesn't really adhere to. We ask the public sector to be very transparent, to be openly accountable, to actually provide information when people evoke right to information. All kinds of things that we ask of the public sector that we don't ask necessarily of the private sector. In other words, in the private sector, or in many of these JVCs where government has minority share and the decisions are largely based on, the interest, largely on the interest of the other shareholders, there are a lot of things that are not explained to anybody. They are not held, accountable to the same principles and values that the public sector entities are held to. That is not to make an excuse for, SOEs that are making losses. And as I indicated earlier, we need to understand that our SOEs were established within a certain historical culture that did not really have profitability as a motive at the initial stages. It was about nation building, provide employment, provide services. That culture hasn't fully gotten out of our system and hasn't gotten out of many of them. However, we live in an era where profitability, growth, progress, and being able to pay dividend have become the norm. How do we get them to make the transition from the old culture to the current culture is really where the conversation should begin. And when we tackle that conversation well and we reorient people, we provide the needed capacity, we provide the needed resource to get people to look around, things will change completely. And I always use China as an example.
We'll come back and talk about that Chinese example, but we'll take another break. When we come back, let's look at some key institutions. Don't go away. Welcome back. It's still Hot Issues here on TV3. We're still interacting with the Director General for SIGA, Professor Michael Kpessa-Whyte. Prof, again, I appreciate you talking to us so much. I do want us to look at a few things. You have explained, what appears to be the differences between these state-owned institutions, the profit-making ones, and then the private institutions as well. I know that is very arguable, very debatable, but because of time, we'll just fast forward a little bit. In recent times, a lot of institutions have come under scrutiny. And we have already noted that the bulk of the problem is in the energy sector. I want us to talk about ECG. There are talks about privatization, either of aspects of, at least one aspect of, the operations of ECG. What does SIGA think about that?
Well, SIGA as an institution has not taken a firm position on that. We currently are analyzing the reports that have been received from ECG for 2024. And in particular, I have called for the governance analysis of ECG, because the governance analysis will allow us to know what kinds of decisions were taken by who and how have those decisions contributed to the issues that have been poured out into the public domain in recent times. Hopefully by next week, that report I will have, and then we will be able to tell where we'll go from there. That report will also not be able to tell us, at least for now, whether ECG should be privatized or not. It needs a much deeper analysis, because ECG is not just an institution like any other business out there. It's a strategic institution. It affects every household in this country, right? It affects every business in this country. It affects every business opportunity in this country. And so any decision about whether ECG should remain state-owned or otherwise should be thought through carefully. At the personal level, I don't think that ECG should be privatized, and I think I want to put that on record. for a number of reasons. However, we also need to think carefully that privatization is not the only option. Within the gamut of new public management principles, within the what do you call it, the framework of new public management, there are a large number of tools and ideas that we can pick to kind of improve the workings of ECG. We can, for instance, do contracting out. And contracting out simply means, is there an aspect of the operations of the ECG that we can contract out so that it can inject some efficiency into the operations of ECG? Or is there an aspect that we can outsource? I mean, that will allow ECG the management that we have now, that probably we are not seeing what we wanted to see as a state, where we outsource that particular aspect and get things done differently so we can see the results. In all this, you can do it in such a way that the state retains its assets, it retains its control and everything, but it's just an aspect of the managerial bit that is, maybe reviewed and looked at, and then maybe given a different operational approach.
Is SIGA directly involved in the processes so far around ECG?
As far as SIGA is concerned, I don't really know what the process is you are talking about.
A committee was formed to look into the privatization. We also know that there was an investigative committee that had to look into some procurement issues for ECG. Is SIGA directly involved in any of this?
No, SIGA is not directly involved.
Why
in this.
shouldn't you be?
So we have to keep in mind that ECG still retains its place as being under the energy sector, and then there is a sector minister who is responsible for the policy oversight and policy directions of the sector. Many of these committees that have been set up, and I think I should correct this, I don't think the committee was set up to look into privatization. I think the minister had corrected that. The committee, in my view, was set up to look at options that could be, rallied to improve the efficiency of ECG. So be that as it is, we don't decide for the minister how the policy direction should be.
No, but based on what SIGA is supposed to do, when events like this are to take place, SIGA should be a key stakeholder.
So there is a point
in such process.
There is a point in which the minister or the ministry will eventually involve SIGA, and we do this all the time.
Okay.
And so we have been following the events. We have been informally having conversations. Well, we belong to the same government. We are all citizens of this country. So we continue to have conversations. At a point when they should involve SIGA formally, they will notify us, and then we will get involved. But even if we are not notified or we don't get involved, and we see something that we feel in the medium to the long term will have adverse implications for the operations of the entity, that is in this case ECG, we quickly will alert both the management of the ECG and the sector minister as well. And sometimes they will invite for a conversation to see the best way.
Have you seen anything so far that would prompt your interest to want to engage ECG?
I think a lot of the things that have been reported in the press are things that are of interest to us. We should agree that many of the things may have some truth validity to them, and some of them could also be sensationally, discussed, as it were. So we are looking through the different issues that have been poured out, and of course, as I indicated, there is currently an in-house report going on ECG in particular. We just had one done on GIHOC, and ECG one is being done now, and that report will give us a sense of some of the things that we think ECG should take a second look at as far as its operations are concerned, and improve its financial performance, improve its service quality, and then overall efficiency in operations as well.
I see. From where you sit as SIGA, what do you think government should do about TOR?
About TOR?
Yes.
Well, TOR is an important national asset, right? And I think we should revive TOR. Is TOR not the one responsible for refining oil for us? Is that not the
some
one?
of it? Is this still a
for now,
a revivable? Does it have viability to be revived, considering what it has gone through and the weight is put in?
If we decide to make TOR a strategic asset and place a strategic value on its operations, and want to believe that TOR's operations have a key role to play in the overall stability of our economy in terms of currency and in terms of fuel supply and everything, Yes, it should be. I mean, other developing countries are building new refineries.
So you think it can still be saved?
It can be saved. I mean, many companies, look, we have companies on our divestiture list, companies that have been approved by cabinet under the previous government, what do you call it, the Bonsa Thai factory, some of the tomato factory in Pualugu, and then others that have been approved by cabinet under the previous administration for divestiture. I mean, some of these people are showing interest in buying them and reviving them. I mean, so if those ones that have been lying idle for over 40 years, still people consider that they can, possess them and put money in them and turn them around and get them to become viable again. How much more Tor? I think that Tor can be made viable if we put... The thing is whether we have what it takes financially now, given our current economic circumstances, to inject the amount of capital that Tor will require to be able to kind of physically get it up and doing. But Tor should be able to come back and run effectively.
Is Tor of interest to SIGA at this time?
It's one of the entities, one of the specified entities that SIGA has oversight.
Let me put it this way. Now, because you talked about low-hanging fruits before, two things I want you to do. When you look at all the institutions that this country owns, over 170 of them, are there some that you think it's time to let go?
Those that the country should let go are those that have been listed on the divestiture list. And in fact, for some of them, in my view, letting go should mean we should explore the JV routes rather than outright privatization.
A
joint venture route. Because keep in mind, the companies that so far, among all the entities that are able to pay dividend to the state, so far, most of them have been JVs, right? And so it makes sense to say that even for the defunct ones, if you can find an investor who will put money into them, rather than selling it outright, we should keep a small interest of the state there so that with that interest, we are able to get some money, year by year, if that company is making profits. That, for me, might be... Because many of these really are completely gone. Literally gone. What is left there is just a skeleton of the structure.
Which ones?
Most of the machines
Which ones do you think about?
So if you go to great, what do you call it? Diamond, the diamond mines in Akwetia, the consolidated diamond mines in Akwetia, and then the Bonsa Thai factory, and then the Pomaze, pottery project, and then the Pualugu, I think is tomato factory, and then the beet factory. All of these, they have not operated for more than 45, 50 years, seriously. So, seriously speaking, there is a sense in which one will say, you know what, they are just there. We are probably keeping staff there to protect them. Many of who really we are not even taking care of properly, so they could be allowed to go. But my thinking is, is it possible that the process of letting go could also mean to have a joint, operation that allows a small interest of the state to be in there for the sake of what might happen in the future that we don't really know. And I think that those ones qualify. But in terms of those which are operating now, we are asking those making losses to submit to us their turnaround plan. The good thing is that we are asking for this from them at a time when new CEOs and new boards are taking over, right? And we have all seen what the records of these entities have been under the previous people who managed them under the previous administration, right? So many of the new CEOs now know that they cannot repeat the same history and anybody will clap for them. They would need to... If your entity was making losses before, your overall benchmark is to break even at least within the first year that you are there, right? And if you were making profits before, then your overall benchmark is that within this first year of your being there, you must pay dividend to the state, which means that you must make more profit and pay something to the state. If you were already paying dividend to the state, then we expect that within this year, the volume of dividend or the quantum of dividend you pay to the state will be higher than what you have paid previously. All of this, beneath all of this, is a drive to inject efficiency and promote effectiveness and promote good governance, because it is these things that will ultimately lead to the kind of outcomes that we are expecting from them.
I see. So that's what you're doing for those companies that are already incurring losses.
Yeah.
But for the companies who are profitable, and not all of them also are paying dividends,
Yes.
as you have indicated already.
Yeah.
What is the plan to ensure that there is sustainability in those profits and there's even growth to the point that they are able to pay dividends?
So again, we need to look at the operations. Quite frankly, some of the big boys that can, or the big girls, in order to be gender sensitive, that can pay dividend are making profits, but they will tell you, oh, well, paying dividend hasn't been part of our overall this thing. And then you ask them, what law makes you think you cannot pay dividend? And then they say, oh, but that's what we've been doing over the years. So, I mean, soon I believe that government will become very clear that you don't earn at profitability. I don't think that's the goal. Profitability should never be the goal for SOEs. Yes, make profits, but you must be in the position where you can pay dividend. I mean, it doesn't make sense when some of these SOEs make profits, they don't pay dividend, but they pay surpluses. You're paying surpluses to your management and staff, but the states whose investment had made it possible for you to be there, you don't think that the state deserves to have some? I don't think that any serious society will run that way and survive.
What do you mean by they're paying surpluses to management and staff?
So, for instance, in the performance contract, there are, in order to incentivize them to give off the best of themselves and achieve their targets, there are provisions that made it possible for them to provide incentives for their management or staff when they are able to meet their targets, right? And I'm saying that it is not enough to just say, when you meet this target, which is maybe profitability target, you pay incentives to this thing. We have to move a notch higher, right? Make profits, pay dividend to the state. Then when you are giving incentives or surplus or paying bonuses to your staff, we can say that, well, the state has gotten a chunk, the company has gotten some profit that you can plow back or can invest in some other subsidiaries or anything else, and then your staff are also being engineered to put in a lot more. That makes perfect sense. Where we have a situation, in some cases where you say you have made profits, right? And much of your profits is probably going into some small bonuses to your management or staff.
Yeah.
That completely is unacceptable. Then we have situations where some of them have not been able to pay dividend to the state, and they are happy that they have made profit. Yes, you should be happy that you have made profit, but what does it mean?
Went to the government.
Yeah, what does it mean? I mean, we are in a country where we are struggling, we are looking for money, and you have entities that have the potential to make huge
and you
profit.
want to change that.
We want to change that. We want to make sure that all the entities, especially those that are commercially oriented, those SOEs in particular, should not only aim at we want to make profit. In our performance contracts going forward, we want you to make profit and also be able to pay dividends to the states. Then we can count you as, yes, you are doing very well. Then we can have conversations about whether there is space for bonuses for your staff whose labor actually translates into those profits, dividends, and
in
so
restructuring those surpluses or bonuses, as you have explained to them, would you also look into restructuring some of the salary structures that we have seen, particularly with our JVCs and JVCs where we have majority shareholding? And I want to put SIC, for instance, into perspective, because it's only this year that a document floated around the remuneration for the head of that institution caused a lot of uproar in the public. Does SIGA have the ability to renegotiate some of those ones, at least to economic level of this country?
Yes, I mean, if you read the SIGA Act, it's quite clear in various sections of the Act what SIGA is capable of doing. But we need to proceed gradually. We have been sunk into a culture that hasn't been very helpful to this country as far as compensation packages are concerned. It appears we consume more than we produce at different levels of government. And this has nothing to do with only the SOEs or the JVs or the whatever. At different levels of our public sector, I mean, the entire public space, you see that there is more perhaps consumption than productivity. And that conversation needs to start somewhere. At the level of, I mean, SIGA and the SOEs, yes, that conversation will start at some point. But how soon should it start? I think it will be part of the overall governance, I mean, reform that needed to be undertaken at the level of the different SOEs. Because it should be such that there should be there should be a benchmark of income, right? Above which should be based on performance, right? Your performance should drive whether you get something more or not.
Even for the boards too.
Of course. Otherwise, what are we paying people bonuses for if they are not meeting specific targets that bring something to the national kitty as far as, fiscal consolidation is concerned?
Thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much for
and
having me.
And we wish you the very best. Looks like you have a lot ahead of you.
Yes, there is a lot ahead of us. It is doable. I mean, in other jurisdictions where SOEs are now the giants of economic development, like in China and other Asian countries, and even in Europe in the early years. In Europe in the early years, it was state-owned enterprises that actually started the process of, giving life to industries and industrialization. The state was heavily present. Do you wonder why we have British Airways? Do you wonder why we have BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation? Do we wonder why we have Crown corporations in Canada, American Air, and all those things? They all started with the heavy state involvement. And so we should not see the state involvement in business or areas considered to be business as abnormal or anomaly. We should rather see it as the norm and rather orient people who run these institutions to a level where they will embrace corporate governance practices and allow them to be able to rake in some efficiency, effectiveness, and profitability.
We'll sit again in a year's time.
Thank you very much.
And measure ourselves.
I believe so.
Thank you so much for watching us this week on Hot Issues. My name is Kemeni Amano. Next week, we'll see you again with another thrilling episode. Bye-bye.